Hi everyone and welcome to Growth Leap. I'm your host, Michel Gagnon. We talk to pretty awesome business builders who are designing disruptive and meaningful companies. With the rise of artificial intelligence and robots, what is the future of work for us mere mortals? Well, our guest today has an answer to that question. Sallyann Della Casa is founder and chief identity hacker at GLEAC, an edtech company who benchmarks, maps, develops, and measures soft skills to current and future jobs. We talk about courage, company culture, how to scale and manage a distributed team, and what GLEAC is doing to help people develop 21st century skills. Enjoy the show. Well, Sallyann, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Before we get into the details and the trick questions, can you explain briefly to the people listening to us what GLEAC is?
Sure. So first of all, I'm so happy you pronounced the name correct. GLEAC, it's geek with an L. Most people get it wrong. So one bonus point there.
Thank you.
What GLEAC does very shortly is it measures and develops your gaps in human skills for any job in 10 minutes a day. And we do it with a patent pending system. So that's very, very short. So whatever job you're interested in and you want to figure out, am I ready for it? Am I fit for it? I'm not talking about hard skills. I'm talking about those amazing human skills that you need. That's 85% of job success. So things like critical thinking, collaboration, creativity, judgment and decision making. We tell you exactly so not very generically, we tell you exactly the right amounts you need. So we have a scale out of 10. 7 is needed for that role, or 5. Let's look at the role of a product manager for IT client facing. So some creativity is needed in that role. Some communication skills are needed in that role. Learning agility is needed in that role. We tell you exactly in what percentage it's needed. We tell you where you stand on it, and then we help you develop it for that particular role.
And we will dig deeper on this, a bit later. But before, I'd like to talk a bit more about you. You're a very interesting person. You graduated high school at 15. You had 5 degrees by the time you were 21. You speak 5 languages. At least that's the latest info I got. Yeah. And you worked as a corporate lawyer for 10 years in the US. You probably had what some call the golden chains, in a good salary, nice title, status. What made you change course and launch GLEAC?
That story about me is the version of me living everybody's expectation of who I should have become, Michelle. And my biggest act of courage to date was leaving all of that and figuring out who am I and why am I here? And most of us never do that in our lives. So on the outside, everything you just said, I mean, I am literally a bona fide nerd, all the degrees, always studying, always excelling. And, that's inbred in me, but I did not know how to be that in my own space. And I did that in my parents' society where I come from. I come from a tiny island, Trinidad and Tobago. That came out in a way that was not me. It's kind of like putting on an outfit that looks really good and then you put it on, it looks horrible on you. And most of us don't know how to take that off. And I did. I'm having the time of my life right now. So it's just an act of courage, Michael, that's Michelle, that's in all of us. And I think we live in a world today where it's way more accepting of us crossing over in domains and not doing the same thing for our entire lives, like our parents and our grandparents. It's okay to have 15, jobs. I think that's the average within a lifetime.
And if you, you don't have a tech background, but decided to launch a tech company, it looks like you like hurdles. How have you managed the learning curve and the process?
Oh my God. So I don't know if it's not a bad word, but it's so damn hard.
Yes.
So let me start by saying every possible thing everyone could have done wrong of not having a tech background, I have done, right? I have bumped my nose over and over. If I had to go back and start, so let's start there about my biggest learnings and where I am. So if I had to go back and start my company, I would have brought in right away a tech founder. with me, a co-founder with me.
Yes.
Just because the importance of someone with tech background, certainly when you're doing your initial MVPs and understanding your minimum viable product and understanding how you're building stuff and how architecture works and how things should scale and the language developers speak, they really need, whether it's a tech manager or a CTO kind of managing them, because I'm a very product founder. And a product vision founder and someone who's constantly doing BD and sales, we speak an entirely different language than the tech team. It's like, me speaking French and they speaking Arabic, and they're like, what is she talking about?
Yeah. Been there, done that.
Yeah. So, I recently, I'm in the process of scaling up a team right now, and someone came to me and they're like, oh, I have a great AI guy and I have whatever. I'm like, listen, if you don't find me a tech manager first and a chief product officer first, I'm not even going to hire for the team, because I've come to understand that in guiding tech teams and making them actually step up and be the best that they can be, you have to have someone who is guiding them, who speaks their language and sees the world. And I can't expect them to see the world the way I do. That's the reason why I'm BD and product, on this end. It's an entirely different world. So it's hard, very hard. And I would have done it differently now, knowing everything that I've known now. Made a lot of mistakes, so many mistakes, but learning as I go. As I said, one of my strengths I discovered I have is my learning agility, and knowing that I can learn fairly quickly gives me the sense of confidence, knowing I can go into anything, which is why many people are like, you went into tech, where's your tech background? And my tech is pretty sophisticated tech. I'm doing machine learning, the whole 9 yards. I'm running the whole gamut. But it's that confidence in knowing I can figure stuff out, I can learn, and you know what? I'm going to bump my nose, but I pivot fairly quickly. I take the learning fairly quickly and try to find a way out. So hopefully that gives some of your listeners some confidence. If I can do it, anybody can do it.
So just very quickly. So basically what you did is you hired, I believe you have a distributed team, right? With your development, mainly most of your development being done in India and maybe Eastern Europe. Correct?
Yeah. So I initially started with an external team on my MVP, and then I built my internal team. And whenever I have to scale, I made it very elastic. So whenever I have to scale in terms of projects coming in, etc., I still have a distributed, external team. In the perfect world, I would just have a full internal team, but I haven't found yet. I'm in that process still, Michelle, of finding that co-founder type tech lead to kind of lead the team. So right now where I'm at, this is working. And yes, India has clearly good talent when it comes to a lot of the infrastructure back-end work. Europe I use more for front-end work, different parts. And then I have a team in the US that does some work also. So distributed right now.
Okay. And I want to come back to the distributed element of your team a bit later, but if we dig a bit deeper on GLEAC, can you tell us a bit more about the actual product you've launched?
Sure.
You have an MVP, but you had an MVP, but you've graduated to product with quite a few customers around the globe. So where are you right now?
So I would say I'm in, official scale up mode, and I'll tell you kind of some of the use cases. That's probably the best way to explain who our clients are and what we do for them. So client number one, Prada, USA. So everyone is familiar with, the big fashion retail brand. And everyone is also familiar with, retail is complete, brick and mortar retail is competing with online. So certainly that particular client, they were interested in how do our salespeople deliver more wow human experiences, and how do we hire those people? Like what kind of behaviors, given in our internal culture, that we bring in the right people for that. So GLEAC, the tool, we used it to do a benchmark of one, their culture, number two, the type of people who perform really well, and we tie it to KPIs. So we're looking at, there is real outcome and impacts here. If we're not shifting, sales going up and all kinds of stuff in terms of what they're measuring in KPI, then the product is not working. Right? My philosophy is if learning cannot be applied back at the job, it's a waste of time. Learning does not change behavior, it's a waste of time. That's the problem with most LMS systems. So we started with Prada by showing them what their culture is and what are the behaviors of the people who are performing the best and the lowest. And then we took their entire population and started developing them 10 minutes a day to pick up on learning agility of the group, and started monitoring KPIs every quarter how we're shifting and improving sales for that particular organization. So that's one use case. A second use case would be our client Accenture. So their augmented reality division approached us of wanting a way to, with their virtual reality experiences, to measure soft skills for a particular job role. So, for example, imagine a call center clerk kind of doing this, putting on a virtual reality headset for 20 minutes. They came to us and said, could you design the storyboards, which is the micro lessons? So we already have this. This is our content. We have situational judgment content. Can we use that content and can you build a storyboard off of that for us to create an experience? And then the data sets from that experience gets fed back to our algorithm. And then we are able to read this. This is what we have our patent on, to be able to say that particular call center person is at a level 3 in emotional IQ, a level 5 in communication. This is the upskilling that they need. So that would be in terms of a second use case. Third use case, and just to show you, the product is built as a plug and play product that you can take apart and put together pieces. So I'm giving you the different use cases so you can see how we're solving clients' issues to their customers, right? Or even directly. The third use case would be a use case for Deloitte. So everyone is familiar. I think, Michelle, you worked at Deloitte, didn't you?
No, I was working for the good one, PwC.
Okay. Oh, PwC. Okay. So you do know that we ran also with PwC. So we were at PwC also.
That's
PwC
true.
was our first. It was our first paying client, PwC. But I'll give you a simple scenario of a Deloitte use case right now. So with COVID. So with COVID, no longer can assessments for leadership roles. Normally, it was like a 2-day process where consulting companies would go in, Korn Ferry or Deloitte. They'd all vie for the same contracts They would have assessments and simulations and case studies and hiring and upskilling. And that can't happen anymore. So that particular use case is them coming to us going, how do we take all of that online? So in that particular case, they're using our benchmark, and we're doing marketing funnels for them, by the way, Michelle, because most of their systems are not agile enough to very quickly mobilize.
Okay.
So through marketing funnels, we've created journeys where it looks like Deloitte, but you can go in and you can take our benchmark and then use our situational judgment lessons as part of the situational judgment part. And then we did some plugins for them where some of our other startup colleagues who are doing live interview, AI reading body language, et cetera, in terms of the case studies. So very quickly, we're able to mobilize and create that flow because we can plug and play parts of our system. So those are some examples of how corporate clients are using the product.
So you've launched the first ever human and behavior index for the workplace. You've talked about mapping existing and future jobs to the human skills and behavior needed. You also talked about just before, if online learning in general does not change behavior or does not improve outcomes, it's a waste of time. But what do you feel is missing in today's education or online learning systems?
It's a really, really simple thing, right? There's something called the forgetting curve, just like there's a learning curve. And there's something called Ebbinghaus's forgetting curve, which basically says, and it's scientifically proven, and after 7 days, the retention of anything is less than 20%. So I want you to think about just you or your listeners, watching a video is not learning. Reading an article is not learning. How many times or how many articles have you read or I read or watched a video and go, wow, that's really great. And then how many of us actually put that stuff into practice? Learning requires practice. And most learning platforms, it's kind of like a Netflix, right? And you can go on there, you can just gulp a bunch of stuff. And, it's you're like an empty vessel, right? And let me just throw stuff at you. But that is not learning. And that's how most systems are set up. GLEAC really takes a different approach to it. It takes the approach that my entire, goal in setting it up is looking at the science. So more than likely, as well-intentioned as you are, after 7 days, whether you did this or not, you're going to forget. So how do we create the practices and situation and relevancy and context to keep you practicing at this? Because what I'm looking is for you to change your habits. So I need you on there for about 25 days for those 5 to 10 minutes. That's when behavioral shift starts happening. So it's all of these ways, there's all kinds of psychology involved of how do I get you on there? It's like getting you to go to the gym. How do I keep getting you on there and not giving you too much? So you only get bite size, 10 to 15 minutes, and it's an actual practice and it's your quality of thought. So it's not multiple choice or forced answer, and tie it to your job and tie it to something that you can measure and go, okay. It's like, it's that going to the gym and looking at yourself in the mirror or putting on the pants every day and going, okay, there's more room.
I'd like to move to, let's say, a portion of the interview where we talk more about running the business.
Sure.
And you've been busily building GLEAC since 2017. You have people distributed team in different countries. You've had ups and downs. What was the moment when you realized that you moved from, let's say, survival mode to a mode where you could really think about growth and scaling?
So I think the period of the time in the world you're asking this question, Michelle, everyone is still in survival mode, or everyone is back to survival mode.
Yes, that's true.
I'm just being very, very frank with you. And I do think that if you're agile and if you're, my competitor, I just have to look in the last week. Kaplan just launched their online type of micro practices. MZ out of the US. These are companies that are $100 million. I'm still a tiny startup. So as far as I'm concerned, I'll probably be in survival mode. But it's what keeps me agile. Now, in terms thinking of growth and strategy, I think I've always thought about how do I leverage, I know it takes the same effort to do a $1,000 deal as a $100,000 deal or $1 million deal. So I've always been that proponent of sometimes, I knew I wanted to go after Accenture or go after some of the big players up front. And, as a tiny startup now starting up, everyone said, what are you doing? They're not even going to speak to you. But I actually knew that gets me to the 1 million quicker. It might take longer to onboard it, 3 months, 6 months in. So I think from a founder's perspective, it has nothing to do with the being in survival mode to growth. Yes, resources matter, but I also think it has to do with who you have as a founder. And I've always been that founder who was always very strategic, going, my scale should not be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It should be 1, 10, 100, 1 million. And that's how I've always thought when nobody else actually believed that was possible, right? That's how I've always been thinking.
And, talking about the current pandemic, what have you done, let's say in the past 2-3 months to react, let's say, or have you changed something to how you run the business or to your priorities given the current circumstances?
Yes and no, right? So whereas before I was a nice to have product, this whole area of human skills now, they matter more now more than anything. So I'm a much needed product now. I've also found, based on who is coming to the table, the ability to get many of these players online, so the plug and play part and being very creative with that and being very creative in terms of not being stuck with systems and trying to figure out how tech teams can do APIs that take time, but the ability to mobilize quick with funnels and all kinds of stuff. I think I've seen a huge upsurge in that, which, in a matter of a couple of days, I can get anyone from a Deloitte to a startup, to a trainer who needs to get online. I can get them online and back serving their customers fairly quickly. So I think that has been the great upsurge. The product hasn't changed at all fundamentally. I think how the different parts of it is being used to help people service their customers has changed a lot.
Okay, so in a way, the crisis has helped a bit your company in terms of the need for the product, but at the same time, it's also driving the competition to come up with their own solution.
Yeah, just given the climate out there, but this second quarter, when we close, we would have done better than we have done our income than the last 2 years. It's just been a complete upsurge in business for us. As I said to you, prior to that, I was swimming against a wave with the product,
Yes.
right? So certain niche type of clients, but everyday people did not think, well, why do I need to teach my people communication and emotional IQ and critical thinking? We all know that, right?
Yes.
So what was discounted is now, on the front burner.
You said in a speech a while back, the quality of my yeses increases by all the things I say no to in my life. You mentioned you have a not to do list. I'm curious, how do you apply this to your, you're a very ambitious, you're a big thinker. How do you apply this discipline, let's say, to your business strategy and initiatives at GLEAC?
Yeah, so I can tell you, number one, it's extremely hard. I don't know if you saw my benchmark, but I'm like a 10, which means I'm off the charts on novelty seeking. So I am that person that somebody says, hey, look, and it's just my natural inclination to look. But absolutely, I've gotten really way better at it, certainly in the last year. And certainly now I've come to realize that I just need to focus in on the things I just want to see to fruition and close. And it's very hard when you're, as I said to you, whether you're scaling up, whatever amount, I'm always hungry in that startup zone, right? So it's very, very difficult at times to go, I'm not going to touch that. I'm not going to touch that. But some of those things that I did say yes to, for example, that Accenture project, most people looked at that and they are like, why are you building storyboards for a VR company? Like that has nothing to do with what you're doing. But the reality is it's the same thread. I saw it as the same thread of what I'm doing. It's just the channel of delivery is different. Just like the channel of delivery in my foundation is in a classroom and the channel of delivery on GLEAC is through the app or, through our SaaS system, the channel of delivery of what I'm doing for an Accenture model is through VR. So that's how I saw that. So I say yes to the things where my core product does not have to change because certainly, I've come to learn in managing tech teams, you can't just go and disrupt a roadmap and all those things that come with running a tech team. But I leave enough room. If it's just a change in the channel of delivery, that's something I can say yes to. All the other things, yes, I've learned to say no to. And, most importantly, the no's, Michelle, that I've said is to people. So there's some people that just drain your energy, and it doesn't matter what the business is. The cost of that on you, just from a human perspective, is too much. I had it happen to me just in this past week, particular company, and I just realized every time I had a conversation with them, it was just like I had to keep proving myself, and and it was I just kind of stepped back and I said, you know what, I really would love to do business with you guys, but I'm certainly not ready right now, and I stepped back, and that was me consciously saying no just to deliver the people who are like hell yeah about a product versus spending my time and energy on something and someone that it was just too draining. So I think my no's a lot have to do with people.
So basically, what you're telling me is that with the different pitches that you've had, different people that you've talked to, with time, you've kind of figured out what your ideal customer was, and now you're spending, you're putting your efforts on those type of customers as opposed to trying to, be everything to everybody.
Yeah, but it's not even being everything to everyone, Michelle. You giving your time, I don't care who the customer, that's an investment of the only, diminishing asset that you have, right? That's all you have. And when it's gone, it's gone.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you really need to kind of choose at the end of the day, who the heck you're going to give your time and attention to, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think most of us take that for granted. We really just take it for granted because we're so busy trying to land the sale when we're in a startup, and we don't realize there is an acquisition cost of that. And if after every time you talk to that person, you feel like a steamroller ran over you and it takes you a couple hours to recover, then it's like, what are you doing?
What processes or tools, approaches are you using to make sure that the team is working in the right directions, especially given the fact that they're in different countries?
Yeah, so and different time zones.
In
So I
different
mean,
time zones.
yeah. So one of the, I think, there are a couple of things that we really streamlined that was really helpful. So I'm a very visual person. So what we did is we removed our design process up away from the development process in terms of our agile and our sprints. And that has been so, so helpful, because what it does is it allows us, before anything goes into a design sprint, which happens before the development sprint, to actually, one of the things we did before that is set up a business use case of, do we even go into design with this? And that was something that was not happening before. I mean, what was happening before is, oh my gosh, we have to go into development with this thing. Design is doing it at the same time. No one has actually thought through the business use case, and it's all happening at one point. So really setting up that there has to be a business use case for something only when the business use case says yes, and we set the parameters. Is this something that's scalable? Is this something that we use GDPR and came up with these a really good acronym for whether something actually makes it or breaks it for us to even go through our design process. Yeah. And then it goes into development. I mean, certainly we have daily stand-ups at the beginning of the day, at the end of the day with the teams. We run on an agile methodology, making sure our Jira boards are constantly updated so there's full transparency. So clearly there are tools that are there where everyone is accountable, and there's a clear visual on what everyone is working on and where is helpful. Now, does it work perfectly all the time? No. I mean, do I have delays in sprints? Absolutely. Do I have delays in releases? Absolutely. Do I have instances where I'm on the team about, I'm a bug control freak, right? So every Monday they have to post bugs, and if I see any P1s on there, I hit the roof, So in the perfect world, none of this would be happening, but you know what? That's all part of the process in running tech, what I've come to learn. And that's why I said to you, if I had to go back and do it, I've learned this the hard way. Remember, I'm, 2.5 years in, I didn't run the team this way at the beginning. Whereas anyone with a tech background would have known this is how you run a team. It took me time to figure out and bumping my nose going, you don't do it that way. Oh, really? You don't do it this way, right? So things like before I go into a development sprint, to make sure the entire team is on a meeting with the scope documents, and scope documents are reviewed by everyone. Everyone asks questions because things can be missed, as to the interpretation of things, bumping my nose, right? Coming out of a development and going, why was that not developed? And someone goes, well, the scope didn't say it, but I'm like, the design said it. So it's these things, Michelle, that, trying to create process around it has been helpful, but do things slip through the cracks still? Absolutely.
Company culture is something that can be quite tricky to manage, or I don't even think you can actually manage it or grasp. Very frequently, you launch a company and, you start running around, you try to do your best, achieve your goals, and then you wake up 2-3 years later and look back and say, damn, I have, either a toxic company culture or I don't have the company culture I'm looking for. How have you managed, to build, let's say, your company culture, given the fact that, first of all, it's tough, but at the same time, you also have a distributed team?
Yeah. So that's been the hardest part. And, I'll explain to you when it comes. So as a leader, I think it's important for you to understand the way that you lead. And what is culture? Culture is just behaviors under one roof, right? And leadership kind of sets the tone for what's okay and not okay in terms of behaviors. I'm a very hands-off leader. So for me, I need, highly competent people around me, and, I leave them. I want you to be brilliant, and just certainly we all check in with each other, but go do brilliant work. I don't want to micromanage you, etc. Let me give you an example of culture and where country culture impacts company culture. So I failed terribly in India with this approach in leadership. So in India, most tech teams, they want to be tightly managed, micromanaged, check in at the end of the day, somebody tell them what to do. And that's how most of the culture was there. So I went in with this methodology of how I manage my culture with my teams in Europe and the US, which has worked really well in India. And it did not work at all, just because locally as a culture, it functions a different way. So where I would go in and I would be very democratic, asking people's opinions and feedback on stuff and what would you like to do? I mean, everyone was very concerned. They're like, why is she asking us to participate in this stuff?
Yes.
I hired a coach for the team about empathy and, speaking up. The coach actually came to me and literally said to me, you're wasting your money. This is not going to work in India. I have to tell you, having a
That's a good coach. That's a good coach, though.
Yeah. So country plays a role, and I am, and I've accepted the fact by raising a mirror, going, I am not a good leader for the team in India. I literally brought in management who was more familiar with the culture to manage the team because I was not doing a good job at it the way I lead. And I was doing a disservice to brilliant young people who just needed a different form of leadership and management that I was not capable of giving. So that would be an example of, the issues you face when it comes to culture in distributed teams, because you're also dealing with country culture issues.
I mean, I totally understand what you mean. I'm a Canadian living in Germany. I've lived in China also. I'm married to a Peruvian girl, so I totally understand how a culture can add, let's say, to the challenge. If we stay with empathy and with a bit more psychology, you said once, I get up every day, one foot brave and the other foot scared. And I take my ninja sword and I walk into my tech company. Running a business is pretty much like a roller coaster. And Ben Horowitz wrote back that managing your own psychology was pretty much the most difficult skill a CEO needed to master. Mm-hmm. With the experience you have right now, what do you say to other CEOs who are struggling to manage that roller coaster even more now, given the the coronavirus situation?
Yeah. So, I think it goes back to the core value of GLEAC, so one of the things with GLEAC is, and where we don't manage it is when we forget we're human. And I think if you just remember, regardless, being a CEO or a founder, that's just the title, right? And that might be your title today, and maybe 4 years from now or 3 years from now, it's irrelevant. When you go home, it's irrelevant to your kids. And I think we forget that. Yes. We forget the fact that there is a human being, and it is perfectly okay to get up one day and be like, holy crap, what did I get myself into? Yeah. Right. And that's okay. That does not mean you're a bad CEO that day or you're a bad founder that day. And then there's some days that you just put on that cape and you're just like ready to take it on. So and I think this is what COVID has done to so many of us. It has grounded us back because most of us, particularly I can tell you for women, I don't know I've never been a male before, but for women, I never worked from my house because the role when I walked through the door was a very different role as a female.
Yeah.
And the fact now that all of us have to be and show up all sides of ourselves, our work side, our personal side, whether you're married, whether you're a son, whether you're a father, it all has to be in the same place, in the same 4, 5, 6 rooms, depending on how, is that recognition that, all of it is actually irrelevant. I'm just a human being trying to get through the day, be my best possible version of myself in all these different roles that I'm playing. So 1 foot encouraged and 1 foot scared is just the human side of me recognizing if I'm going to take anything on, that 1 foot scared means I'm always willing to stretch. I'm not in my comfort zone. That's how we should all be until our last breath, right? I mean, if we're truly growing and exploring the full length and breadth, how big and tall and wide we are, we should wake up every day, 1 foot encouraged and one going, holy crap.
So being scared is normal, but the secret is more resilience. What you do actually with that fear.
Certainly, right? So, I mean, being in fear and not stretching and growing with it and not having it power you equals being depressed, not moving forward, being stuck. But when you use that fear to power you, right? So just look at all the psychology, behind, I think it's Facebook, I think they said that they wait till you're like most bored, which is around 3 or 4 o'clock or something like that, to start pushing you ads for you to buy stuff. It's pure psychology. Use your fear to power you.
Maybe one last thing. What's next for GLEAC?
Oh my gosh, I am ready to scale massively. I mean, at the end of the day, I've always been, if I look back to the story of the 13-year-old kid who would go volunteer at the Make-A-Wish Foundation or go sit and give, sessions when I, was in college to people in the psychiatric ward, just trying to show people how it doesn't matter what your degree is. It doesn't matter what your resume say. You have these amazing human abilities and you can show up in the world and flourish and thrive. That's a really powerful thing to know, Michelle, and a powerful gift and responsibility to have the tools and the ability to make it happen. And I just want to spray it on the entire world. So I am ready, whether it is with partnerships, whether it is with, as you can see, the kind of people I'm going after. I don't know, maybe Microsoft might be listening, right? I have this vision with Microsoft. Or maybe one day you go into your LinkedIn profile and you see your GLEAC human skill index with your situational judgment. This is where my vision is that as human beings, resumes one day will not exist, and you can just turn on and off your quality of thought and the way you act in situations, and that's how jobs, projects, that's how we're going to find other amazing humans, and that's how we're going to show up in the world. And that's what I'm aiming for.
That's an exciting future. I wish you all the best. Sallyann, thank you so much for your time. What's the best way for our people to follow you? Is it on LinkedIn? I think you're quite active.
Yes, absolutely. So LinkedIn, and it's my name, Sallyann Della Casa. And as I said to you, please feel free to reach out if anything I've said, I've touched a chord with you.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. This is it, folks. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show. Check us out as usual at stunninau.com for show notes, but also for extremely useful resources that will help you manage and scale your meaningful business. Thanks. Ciao.